I'm 77 years old now, sitting on the porch of my little home in Savannah, Georgia. The warm evening breeze carries the sound of my great-grandchildren playing in the yard. Their laughter rings like music, and for most of my life I believed I would never hear such joy in my own family. You see, I carry a story I've hidden for more than 60 years. A truth I buried so deeply, hoping the silence would protect me. But secrets have a way of weighing down the heart, and tonight I want to lay mine down. So if you're watching, baby, go ahead and like this video, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. 'Cause this ain't just my story, it's the story of too many women who had to smile through the silence. It begins on a hot summer morning in 1959, when I was just 12 years old. My name then was Clara Lawson. Before I tell you about the dusty red road where my childhood ended, you need to understand what my life was like before. I was the daughter of Henry Lawson, a tall, broad-shouldered man with hands hardened by years working as a dockhand in Charleston. To others, he was a man of strength and grit, but to me, he was mostly a shadow. He came home only a few days each month, always tired, always silent, his face set in a permanent scowl. My mother, Margaret, had been the warmth of our small house. She had a way of filling even the plainest day with joy, her laughter while stirring a pot of stew, the smell of cakes she baked on Sundays, the songs she hummed as she braided my hair. But she died of tuberculosis when I was just 9. Her death hollowed our home. My little brother, Samuel, was only 7 when she passed. He cried himself to sleep most nights, clutching the quilt she had sewn. I tried to comfort him, though I was only a child myself. Father Henry, well, he never seemed to grieve the way we did. He grew colder, more withdrawn, as if her death had burned the last softness out of him. Neighbors noticed. They'd whisper that Henry Lawson was carrying too much anger for one man, that he drank too much, that he had no patience for raising children. Perhaps they were right. Samuel and I spent more time at old Mrs. Cooper's house next door than our own. She was kind, feeding us biscuits and gravy when Father forgot to leave money for food. But no amount of kindness from neighbors could fill the silence that settled inside me after Mama died. I longed for my father to look at me, to notice me, to say something tender. I imagined him taking me for ice cream in town, or patting my shoulder and saying he was proud. That was my childish dream, that one day he'd finally see me. That summer morning began differently. Father came into my room early, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Get dressed, Clara," he said curtly. "We're going for a ride." My heart skipped. A ride? Just him and me? He had never asked such a thing. I thought maybe he wanted to spend the day together, maybe even stop for a treat in town. I scrambled to pull on my best cotton dress, the yellow one with little white buttons Mama had sewn before she died. My childish heart thumped with excitement. When we climbed into his old green pickup, my legs barely reached the floorboard. I swung them back and forth nervously, smiling, hoping he would smile back. He didn't. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the wheel so firmly his knuckles went pale. We drove for hours down roads I'd never seen before. The air was thick with the smell of sun-scorched grass, cicadas screamed in the trees, and dust kicked up behind the tires. I stared out the window at the endless fields and barbed wire fences, thinking maybe this was his way of showing me a piece of the world. But he didn't say a word. The silence grew heavy, like a storm cloud pressing down. Friends, if you're following this story so far, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more true stories of survival and hope to light. Finally, we reached a lonely stretch of road shaded by a massive oak tree. Its branches stretched wide, heavy with acorns, casting a pool of shadow on the red dirt below. Without warning, Father pulled the truck over and killed the engine. He sat still, staring straight ahead. The only sound was the ticking of the engine cooling in the summer heat. I looked at him, waiting, hoping he would finally explain where we were going. Then he spoke. "Clara," he said, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding mine, "you're going to stay here for a while." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean, Daddy? Are we camping? Did you bring a tent?" He didn't answer. Instead, he climbed out of the truck and walked to the back. My heart fluttered with confusion. When he returned, he carried a worn cloth bag. He thrust it into my hands. Inside were 2 patched dresses, a bar of soap, and a small piece of stale bread. My smile faded. "Daddy, what's this for?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He finally looked at me then, and his eyes were harder than I'd ever seen them. "I can't raise you any more," he muttered. "It's too much with Samuel. You're older. You'll figure something out." The words slammed into me like a fist. At first, I couldn't believe him. My 12-year-old mind refused to accept what he meant. I grabbed his arm desperately. "Please, Daddy. I'll be good. I won't cause trouble. Please don't leave me here." But he pulled away. He turned, walked back to the truck, and slid behind the wheel. I stumbled after him, sobbing, clinging to the door. "Daddy, please. I'm scared. How will I get home? What about Samuel?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look back. The engine roared to life, and before I could stop him, the truck lurched forward. Dust exploded into the air, choking my cries, blinding my eyes. And then he was gone. I stood frozen, clutching the cloth bag, watching the only family I had disappear around the bend. The silence that followed was deafening. The cicadas had stopped their song. The breeze had stopped. Even my heartbeat seemed to hesitate, as if the world itself had abandoned me. I was 12 years old, standing on a road I didn't know, with no food, no water, and no idea how to survive. And in that moment, I understood something no child should ever have to know, what it feels like to be completely, utterly alone. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have imagined, was that this terrible moment was also the beginning of something greater. That under that oak tree, abandoned and terrified, my life was about to change forever. If this part of my story has touched you, please take a second to like, share, and make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will truly surprise you. When my father's pickup truck disappeared in that storm of dust, I stood there clutching the cloth bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sound of the engine faded until there was nothing but the heavy silence of the countryside. That silence terrified me more than anything else. I had never been truly alone before. Even after Mama died, there was always Samuel in the next room, or Mrs. Cooper fussing over us with biscuits. But now, there was no one. Only me, a dirt road I didn't know, and the giant oak tree towering above me like a silent witness to my ruin. At first, I waited. My childish heart clung to the foolish hope that Daddy would circle back. That maybe this was some kind of test or lesson, and he'd come back to scoop me up, saying, "See, Clara? That's why you need to listen." But the minutes stretched into hours. The shadows shifted with the sun. My throat went dry, my stomach rumbled, and reality settled like a stone in my chest. He wasn't coming back. I sat down under the oak tree, hugging my bag to my chest. The cicadas screamed again in the branches overhead, but their song only made the silence around me feel louder. I tried nibbling on the piece of bread he had given me, but it was hard and stale. I chewed slowly, tears streaming down my cheeks, each bite tasting more like sorrow than food. Friends, if you've ever felt abandoned or invisible in your own life, please like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that no one is truly alone when we share them. As the sun sank lower in the sky, painting the horizon in orange and purple, a new fear gripped me. Darkness was coming. I had never slept outside before. I had grown up hearing stories about snakes slithering through tall grass, coyotes howling at night, and men who roamed the roads with bad intentions. My childish imagination twisted every sound into a monster waiting just out of sight. I clutched my mother's old rosary, one of the few things inside the cloth bag, and whispered the Hail Mary over and over, hoping she could somehow hear me from heaven. The night fell quickly, swallowing the road in shadow. The oak tree's branches became black claws stretching across the dirt. Crickets chirped, frogs croaked in the distance, and at one point, I thought I heard the long, mournful howl of some wild animal. My heart nearly stopped in my chest. I huddled against the tree trunk, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to make myself as small as possible. My tears came again, hot and heavy, until they blurred the stars overhead. Every time a breeze rustled the leaves, I jumped. Every time the grass shifted, I imagined eyes watching me. My mind told me the road was full of dangers, though in truth, it was just empty. But the emptiness itself was its own danger. At some point, exhausted from fear, I opened the bag again. I took out the small wooden rosary. Mama had always told me, "This will keep you safe, Clara. When you feel afraid, pray." So I prayed. My hands shook as I slid the beads through my fingers. My lips moved in whispers, "Hail Mary, full of grace." The rhythm of the words soothed me, even as my body trembled. It was the only thing keeping me from losing my mind completely. That little rosary felt like Mama's hand on my shoulder, her voice reminding me to be brave. I fell asleep for short bursts, but each time I startled awake, convinced I had heard footsteps. My dreams twisted into nightmares of my father's truck leaving me again and again, the dust choking me until I couldn't breathe. When dawn finally came, it was a thin mercy. My body ached from sleeping on roots and dirt. My clothes were stiff with sweat and dust, and my throat burned with thirst. I stood slowly, my legs weak, and stared down the empty road. A part of me still prayed I might see the green pickup come rolling back, Daddy leaning out the window saying it was all just a mistake. But there was nothing. The sun rose higher, and the heat grew unbearable. My lips cracked, and my stomach knotted in hunger. I chewed on the crust of bread left from the night before, but it barely helped. That's when the hopelessness sank deeper. I was 12 years old and completely on my own. I thought about Samuel. Was he asking about me? Did he know what Daddy had done? Was he crying the way he used to cry for Mama? The thought of my little brother alone in that house with a man too bitter to love broke me more than my own hunger did. Now and then, I would hear a sound in the distance, the slow creak of a cart or the rumble of a truck carrying produce to market. My heart would race, thinking maybe, just maybe, my father had come back for me. But every cart and truck rolled by without stopping, leaving nothing but more dust in their wake. Some drivers glanced my way but kept going. Maybe they thought I belonged to someone nearby. Maybe they didn't care. Each time, I felt more invisible, more forgotten. That second evening was worse. The day's heat left me dizzy, and by the time the sun began to dip again, I felt faint. I pressed the rosary to my chest, whispering, "Mama, please help me. I don't know how to do this." The colors of the sunset should have been beautiful reds and golds stretching across the horizon, but to me, It looked like the sky itself was closing in. I knew darkness was coming again, and I didn't think I could survive another night alone. My body was weak, my throat dry, my spirit breaking. My prayers grew desperate. God, send me someone. Please, send me someone. And that's when it happened. Just as the shadows lengthened across the road, I saw a figure in the distance. A woman walking slowly, balancing a large tin bucket on her head. She grew clearer as she approached a short, round woman with silver hair tied into a bun, wearing a faded blue floral dress. She walked with the steady rhythm of someone used to carrying heavy things. I thought I was dreaming. I rubbed my eyes, blinked, but she was still there. She stopped when she saw me huddled under the oak tree, dust-streaked and trembling. She lowered her bucket of water carefully to the ground, her eyes widening with shock and concern. "My heavens, child," she said, her voice soft but strong, "what on earth are you doing out here all alone?" At those words, I broke. My tears flowed so hard I could barely answer. But inside me, I knew this was the flicker of light I had been begging for. That was the first time I laid eyes on Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, the woman who would change my life forever. And what she did next would rewrite the course of my entire future. If you're with me on this journey, please don't forget to like, share, and make sure you subscribe, because the next part of my story is when hope finally arrived. She set the tin bucket down as if it were made of glass, and looked me over with eyes that were steady and warm, the kind that make you feel seen even when you'd rather disappear. "My heavens, child," she said, breath catching with worry, "what are you doing out here all alone?" The words cracked something inside me. I tried to answer, but what came out was a tangle of sobs. She didn't push. She just reached for the bucket, cupped water in her hand, and held it to my lips the way a mother might offer milk to a crying baby. I drank too fast and choked. She waited, then offered more, slower this time, until the desert in my throat softened and I could breathe again. "Name?" she asked gently. "See, Clara," I managed. "I'm Evelyn Brooks," she said. "You're safe with me, Clara. No child sleeps under a tree on my road. Not while I've got a roof." She pulled a small cloth parcel from her shoulder bag, 2 thick slices of cornbread, and a wedge of cheese wrapped in paper. I chewed, each bite waking my body like a struck match. Friends, if you believe every child deserves a safe place to land, please like, share, and make sure you subscribe. These stories reach someone who needs them because you help carry them. Her house, she said, was just up the way, not far, but the late-day heat made the road feel longer than time itself. Evelyn kept a pace I could manage, pausing whenever she sensed my legs wobble. She talked while we walked, nothing heavy, just soft things to keep fear from climbing back up my spine. How the well was running good again after last week's repairs. How the tomatoes were finally reddening on the vine. How a black hen named Glory had started hiding her eggs under the porch for reasons known only to hens and God. "Folks think quiet roads are empty," she said. "They aren't. They're full of listening. Today they brought you to me." The lane to her place was hemmed in by a split-rail fence and sun-fat pasture. A dog dozed in the shade, thumped its tail at us, and went back to dreaming. Her house appeared small, whitewashed, with pale blue shutters and a tin roof that pinged softly as the heat let go. A wind chime made from bent teaspoons tinkled by the door. Everything looked humble and tended, like the kind of place where we'ds know better than to stay. Inside, the rooms were tidy and bright. A quilt sprawled across the back of a couch like a sunrise. A cross hung above the kitchen doorway. On the sill, a jar of wildflowers tilted toward the light. "First things first," Evelyn said. "Bath." Out back, beside a little shed, she had rigged a wash station, a big basin, a kettle set over coals, and a tin dipper shower with nail prick holes. She warmed the water, tested it on her wrist, and handed me a bar of amber glycerin soap that smelled like lemons and patience. Clothes on the hook, sweetheart. Take your time. The water reached places dust had set, like sorrow. It ran brown at my feet, then clear. When I scrubbed my arms, I could still feel the tree bark, the night, the empty road clinging to me. I washed until the sting in my skin faded and a new ache took its place, the kind that comes when you let go of holding yourself together too long. Evelyn left a soft nightgown on a chair for me, too big at the sleeves, generous everywhere else. When I stepped back into the kitchen, she glanced up and smiled a smile that didn't try to fix anything. It simply welcomed what was true. There you are, she said. Let's get a meal for you. She set a bowl of vegetable soup on the table, okra, tomatoes, lima beans, the broth fragrant with onion and bay. Beside it, a heel of warm cornbread and butter from a crock. She poured milk into a glass and slid it toward me as if we'd been doing this for years. You eat, she said, sitting across from me. I'll talk, so you don't have to. She told me about herself the way you'd thread a needle, careful, unhurried. A widow of 10 years, no children. Tiny farm, just enough to feed her and a few neighbors. Sewing when folks needed it. Jars of preserves sold at the market come Saturday. A church bell she could hear from her porch if the wind was right. Some folks call this alone, she said, but I call it held. The land holds me. Work holds me. The Lord holds me. Maybe for a while I can hold you too. I didn't mean to cry again. But tears have their own clocks. She didn't bring a speech about strength. She brought a towel and pressed it into my hands, then bowed her head and said a brief grace that sounded like a conversation she'd been having all her life. When my bowl was empty and my shoulders had stopped shaking, she cleared the dishes and set a thin mattress in the front room with clean sheets and a lavender-scented pillow. She dimmed the lamp. You sleep right here where I can see you, she said. You're safe, Clara. If you wake from a bad dream, call my name. I did wake, again and again. Certain I heard the rumble of a truck on a far road. Certain the dust would find me even here. Each time I opened my eyes, there was a slip of lamplight under Evelyn's door, like a promise. Once, near midnight, she patted out, covered me a second time, and hummed a tune I didn't know until I knew it was a lullaby. Dawn came with chicken chatter and kettle steam. I woke to the smell of coffee and hot grits. Evelyn had set 2 plates, scrambled eggs bright as marigolds, sliced peaches slick with their own syrup. Eat, then we'll stretch our legs, she said. After breakfast, she handed me a basket of food. Chickens first, she grinned. They've been talking about breakfast since yesterday. Out we went. Glory the hen strutted like a mare. I scattered feed. The birds rushed like a whispered secret. Then we checked the garden, okra towering like green candlesticks, cucumbers hiding under broad leaves, tomatoes blushing toward red. She pressed dirt under her fingernails and showed me how to pinch back basil so it would keep giving. Garden's a good teacher, she said. It doesn't hurry the lesson, and it celebrates small progress as loud as a parade. If this tenderness is speaking to your heart, please tap like, share this with someone who needs hope today, and make sure you subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that heal. Days settled into a rhythm. Feed the chickens. Water before the heat took hold. Hang laundry on the line so the sun could do what soap could not. In the afternoons, we read from a stack of old books Evelyn kept in a wooden crate, psalms and recipes, seed catalogs, and dog-eared novels. She let me sound out the words I didn't know, correcting with a patience that felt like shade. At the table, I learned her hands' language. Cooking is a kindness you can taste, she said, showing me how to coax onions into sweetness, how to stir without scalding, how to test cake doneness with a whisper of a touch. We made peach preserves that held the sun inside. We canned tomatoes like captured August. One afternoon, we tried bread. Flour, water, salt, and thyme, she said. Most folks rush the only ingredient they can't see. I kneaded too hard, then too soft, then forgot to set the timer. When we pulled the loaves, the tops were near black, the kitchen filled with the thin, bitter smell of mistake. A lightning-fast panic seized me, the kind that comes from old rules. Waste is punished, errors are unforgivable, any wrong step means you are the wrong thing. I'm sorry, I blurted, reaching for the hot pan, nearly burning my fingers. I'm sorry, Evelyn slipped on a mitt and lifted the bread, set it down on the board, and looked at me, not the loaf, first. Bread burns, she said, a half-smile tugging her mouth. We'll shave the tops, make croutons, and feed some to Glory. Nothing's wasted in this house. Not food. Not lessons. She poured cool water into a glass and set it in my hand. Listen to me, Clara. A mistake is a teacher you invited by accident. Thank it, learn, let it leave. Something loosened in my chest, like a knot finally showing its untying. No lecture. No raised voice. Just a wide place to be human. It was the first time I believed kindness could last. Kindness grows noise the way summer grows thunder. Not everyone likes it. The first neighbor to call by was Mrs. Talbot, a spare woman with eyes like thumbtacks and a hat that looked stolen from a church pew. She brought eggs and questions. Evening, Miss Brooks, she said, stepping onto the porch without waiting to be asked. Her gaze flicked to me, took inventory, and returned to Evelyn. Didn't know you had company. Family visit. Evelyn poured sweet tea into jelly jars. This is Clara, she said easily. She's staying a while. A while, Mrs. Talbot repeated, tasting the words. Where's her people? Finding their way, Evelyn said. Meanwhile, we're keeping her fed and rested. Mrs. Talbot smiled with only her teeth. Well, I do hope everything is proper. You know how tongues wag. We won't give them anything good to say, Evelyn replied, which is the sweetest way I've ever heard anyone say mind your business. When Mrs. Talbot left, a little hush settled. Evelyn watched the road until the dust flattened, then turned to me. People get nervous when love ignores paperwork, she said. But we'll do this right, Clara. I won't have you scared every time a car turns down our lane. Do what right? I asked, though I already feared the answer. Make this home official, she said. That means talking to folks who keep files and stamp things. The words jolted the old panic awake. My mind sprinted through every scary version. A cold office with harder eyes than Mrs. Talbot's. A man at a desk saying I must be moved. A door closing behind me while Evelyn stands outside with empty hands. She must have seen the fear hit because she took my fingers in hers and squeezed. Look at me, she said. I won't let anyone carry you off like a parcel. We'll face it together. If the Lord brought you to my road, He'll make a road through their rules. That night I slept with my mother's rosary under my pillow and Evelyn's vow in my ear. The moon dragged silver across the floorboards. Every creak sounded like a step toward or away from me. 2 mornings later, after we'd pegged clean shirts on the line and set a pot of beans to simmer, a car rolled down the lane slowly as a sermon. It stopped by the gate. A young woman climbed out, smoothing her skirt, a leather folder tucked under her arm. She wasn't unkind, but she wore the look of someone trained to find what's missing. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and met her at the porch steps. "Mrs. Brooks," the woman asked, glancing at me, then back at Evelyn. "I'm Miss Carter from the county office. I'd like to ask a few questions about the child." The word child landed between us like a gavel. Evelyn squared her shoulders. "You can ask," she said, "and we'll answer." I felt my mouth go dry. The rosary in my pocket grew heavy as a stone. Miss Carter opened her folder, clicked a pen, and looked up with a polite, practiced smile. "Let's begin." Miss Carter's pen clicked like a hammer as she opened her folder. She looked at Evelyn, then at me, her eyes professional but not unkind. "So, Mrs. Brooks," she began, "how did this child come into your care?" I froze at the word child. I wasn't just Clara anymore. I had been reduced to a case file, a problem to be solved. My stomach clenched, my fingers fumbled for Mama's rosary in my pocket. Evelyn didn't flinch. She sat tall in her chair, smoothed her apron, and spoke in the calm voice of someone who knew truth didn't need decoration. "I found her on the road 2 weeks ago," she said. "Alone, hungry, filthy, with nothing but a cloth bag. Her father abandoned her. I couldn't leave her there to die." Miss Carter scribbled notes. "Do you have proof of abandonment? Any documentation?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Her father didn't hand me paperwork, ma'am. Just a child left like a stray. My proof is that she's alive because I took her in." Miss Carter looked at me then. "Clara, can you tell me what happened?" My throat closed. I wanted to explain, but the memory of that red road was still raw, still choking me. My lips trembled, my eyes watered. Evelyn reached across the table and laid her hand over mine. "She's been through enough," Evelyn said softly. "She doesn't need to relive it all for your file. Friends, imagine being 12 and having to prove you deserve a family. If you believe no child should face that, please like, share, and make sure to subscribe. Together we spread these truths." Miss Carter closed her folder with a sigh. "Mrs. Brooks, you've done a kind thing, but you must understand, this is irregular. The law doesn't allow a child to simply stay with someone because it feels right. There are procedures. Foster care, guardianship hearings, adoption petitions." Her words stabbed me with fresh panic. Foster care, hearings. Words that meant strangers, rules, separation. I blurted out, "Please don't take me away. I want to stay here. I don't want anyone else." For the first time, Miss Carter's mask slipped. Her sternness softened, and I thought I saw pity in her eyes. But pity wasn't power. She gathered her things and stood. "I'll file a preliminary report. There will be visits, interviews, court reviews. Until then, Clara stays here, but nothing is guaranteed." Her shoes clicked on the porch as she left, and when the car rolled back down the lane, dust curling behind it, the air seemed thinner. That evening, I couldn't eat. The beans on my plate tasted like ashes. "What if they take me away?" I whispered. Evelyn turned to me, her voice steady as the earth. "Clara, listen to me. Love isn't weaker than paperwork. We'll fight, and we'll win. God didn't bring you to my road just to have you carried off like baggage." Her words should have comforted me, but I saw how her hands trembled when she reached for her glass. She was afraid too, but she wasn't letting fear drive. That night I slept fitfully, dreaming of judges in black robes and doors that closed with finality. Each time I woke, Evelyn's shadow was there, sitting in her rocker, keeping watch. Over the next week, Evelyn began gathering what she called our ammunition. Letters from neighbors. Mr. Daniels, the feed store owner, wrote that he'd never seen a child blossom so quickly. Reverend Taylor from the church testified that I was attending Sunday school and thriving. Even Mrs. Cooper, who had once looked at me with doubt, wrote a note. This child belongs where she is loved. But Evelyn knew it wouldn't be enough. We need someone who knows the rules, she muttered one morning. A lawyer. The word scared me. Lawyers were people from newspapers or faraway courtrooms, not from our dusty little town. But God has a way of sending the right people at the right time. It happened on a rainy Thursday. Evelyn had gone to sell vegetables at the farmer's market when a sudden downpour forced her to take shelter under the awning of a hardware store. That's where she met him, Mr. Thomas Whitman. He was tall and lean, with gray threaded through his dark hair and eyes that carried a kind of calm you don't often see. When he noticed Evelyn struggling to keep her baskets dry, he rushed to help, his umbrella tilting over both of them. You've got more than a storm on your shoulders, he said, almost gently. What's troubling you? Something in his voice made Evelyn open the dam she'd been holding. Right there, under the dripping awning, she told him our whole story. How she found me, how the county threatened to take me away, how she feared love would lose to law. When she finished, Mr. Whitman was silent for a long moment. Then he said the words that changed everything. Mrs. Brooks, sometimes the best families aren't the ones born in blood, they're the ones built by love. And love deserves defending. I'm a lawyer. Let me help. That night, Evelyn brought him to the house. He didn't arrive like a man swooping in to rescue, but like a neighbor, polite and attentive. He asked me questions, not cold legal ones, but human ones. What do you love most about being here, Clara? The garden, I whispered. And being safe. He nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Evelyn. The law is rigid, but it isn't blind. We'll start with guardianship and push for adoption. But it won't be easy. The state will argue you're too old, not wealthy enough, not the right fit. They'll suggest foster homes, maybe even an orphanage. I gasped, clutching my rosary. No, I can't. Mr. Whitman raised his hand gently. But we'll show them. We'll show them she belongs here. Pictures, letters, testimonies, school reports. And if her father can be found, we'll push for his formal renunciation of rights. That will clear the way. Evelyn exhaled as though she had been holding her breath for weeks. Thank you, she whispered. Weeks later, we walked into the county courthouse, our hearts thudding. The building loomed, all stone and iron, smelling of old paper and ink. My knees wobbled as we passed through the double doors. Inside, the courtroom felt cold. The judge sat high, his robe black as coal, spectacles perched on his nose. A prosecutor I didn't know stood ready with files stacked like bricks. Case of Clara Lawson, minor child found in the care of Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, the bailiff called. My name sounded strange when spoken by strangers. The judge's voice boomed. Mrs. Brooks, you wish to adopt this child? Yes, Your Honor, Evelyn said, her voice steady though her hands clutched her apron. She is my daughter in every way that matters. I want to make it true on paper. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Brooks is nearly 60 years old. She has limited income, no blood relation, and there are younger families on the adoption list. I felt my stomach plummet. Mr. Whitman rose calmly. Your Honor, with all due respect, what this child needs is not bureaucracy. She needs stability. She has been abandoned, traumatized, and is finally thriving in a safe home. Removing her now would inflict further harm. The judge looked at me. His eyes softened a little. Child, do you understand what adoption means? I swallowed hard, then whispered, it means I'll never be left on the road again. The weeks between that first court date and the next hearing stretched like a rope across a canyon, thin, fragile, and ready to snap under the weight of worry. Every day I woke with the same question burning in my chest. Would they take me away from Evelyn? She never showed fear in front of me. She kept our little house humming, feeding the chickens, baking bread, tending the garden, but I saw it in her hands when she thought I wasn't looking. They shook when she folded laundry. They clenched too long around the broom handle. But in her voice, there was only steel. Clara, you are my daughter. They just haven't signed the paper yet. Mr. Whitman visited often, his briefcase filled with papers, letters, and photographs. He collected testimony from anyone who would speak for us. Reverend Taylor wrote that I had joined Sunday school and blossomed in faith. Mr. Daniels from the feed store testified I was as much Evelyn's child as the freckles on her face. Even Mrs. Cooper, who had raised eyebrows at first, wrote a heartfelt letter. Clara is no burden. She is a joy. Evelyn hung a new curtain in my room, painted the walls a soft blue, and set a little desk by the window. If the judge asks if you have a proper place, she said, you'll show him this is yours. Her preparations weren't for show. They were proof, to herself, to me, to the world, that this bond was as real as any bloodline. Friends, think about this. How many children out there wait for someone to fight for them this fiercely? If you believe every child deserves that, please like this story, share it, and make sure to subscribe so more people hear it. The morning of the final hearing, Evelyn woke me before dawn. She pressed my hair into a neat braid, tied with a ribbon she'd sewn herself. She wore her navy dress, the one she saved for Sundays and funerals, and held my hand as we walked up the courthouse steps. Inside, the air felt colder than before. The prosecutor was already there, stacks of files arranged like soldiers on parade. The judge sat with the same stern face, spectacles low on his nose. The bailiff called our case, in the matter of Clara Lawson. I shivered. That name, Lawson, felt like a ghost I had long since buried. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, while we do not question Mrs. Brooks's kindness, we must consider the child's long-term welfare. Mrs. Brooks is 58, a widow of limited means. There are families waiting, younger, wealthier, more suitable. Each word felt like a door closing. Then Mr. Whitman rose, calm but commanding. Your Honor, this case isn't about wealth. It isn't about age. It's about love. For nearly a year, Clara has lived in a safe, stable, nurturing environment. To remove her now would not be providing for her welfare. It would be inflicting another trauma. Look at the evidence. Look at the child herself. The judge turned his gaze to me. My hands shook in my lap. Clara, he said gently, do you like living with Mrs. Brooks? Yes, sir, I whispered. She takes care of me. She makes me feel safe. And do you want to live with her forever? My voice broke, but I forced the words out. Yes, sir. She's already my mama. The judge tapped his pen against the desk. The sound echoed like a drum in my ears. This is not a decision to be taken lightly, he said. I will recess for 15 minutes to review the files. 15 minutes felt like 15 years. I sat between Evelyn and Mr. Whitman, clutching my rosary so tightly it left marks in my palm. Evelyn whispered, no matter what happens, you are mine. When the judge returned, the entire room stilled. He adjusted his spectacles, shuffled the papers, and began. After careful consideration of the testimony, the evidence presented, and above all, the welfare of the child. I held my breath. The court grants the petition. Effective immediately, Clara Lawson shall be recognized as the legal daughter of Mrs. Evelyn Brooks. For a moment, the world stopped. Then it burst open. Evelyn sobbed and laughed all at once, clutching me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. Mr. Whitman smiled like he'd just won a great battle. Even the bailiff cleared his throat, blinking fast. The judge leaned forward. "Congratulations, Mrs. Brooks. And to you, Clara, welcome home." We left the courthouse floating. Evelyn kept repeating, my daughter," as if saying it enough times would etch it permanently into the sky. That night, she insisted on a celebration. She cooked fried chicken, green beans from the garden, and a peach pie that made the whole house smell like heaven. At the table, she held my hands and said, "Today wasn't just about papers, Clara. Today, the world agreed with what God already knew: you are mine, and I am yours." For the first time in my life, I believed I truly belonged. The weeks that followed glowed with possibility. Evelyn expanded the garden, planted more fruit trees, and started making preserves for the market. Together we set up a small stand, our jars of jam labeled Brooks Family Homemade. At school, when teachers asked my name, I said proudly, Clara Brooks. No hesitation. No shame. Just the truth. Evelyn was different too. She walked with a lighter step, smiled more easily, and every evening, when we closed up the house, she'd tuck me in and whisper, "Good night, my daughter." For years, I had dreamed about Samuel, my little brother with hair like chestnut bark and eyes too big for his small, sorrowful face. In my memories, he was always 7 years old, crying into Mama's quilt, asking why she had left us. I thought of him often but believed I'd never see him again. Yet there he was, a grown man, standing in front of my market stall, saying words I had longed for and dreaded all at once. "My name is Samuel. I've been looking for a girl named Clara." At first, I couldn't move. My mouth went dry, my hands froze midair over jars of jam. He looked older, worn by life, but there was no mistaking the slope of his nose, the angle of his jaw. It was him. "Samuel," I whispered. His lips trembled. He nodded. "It's me, Clara. It's really me." The next moment, we were in each other's arms, clinging as if we could erase the lost years by holding tighter. People at the market stopped to stare, but I didn't care. My brother, my Samuel, was alive. Friends, if you believe reunions like this prove that love always finds its way, please like, share, and make sure you subscribe. These stories live on because you help carry them. That evening, Evelyn set an extra plate at the table, her eyes glistening as she watched us sit side by side for the first time in nearly a decade. The food was barely touched. What we hungered for was answers. Samuel's voice shook as he began. "After Daddy left you on that road, things at home got worse. He told me you had run away. I didn't know the truth. I kept asking where you were, but he'd get angry, say you didn't want us anymore." I gasped, pressing a hand to my chest. Samuel continued, "By the time I was 13, I couldn't take it. He drank more every night, came home bitter, sometimes violent. So I ran. Slept in alleys, worked odd jobs on the docks, anything to survive. But all those years, Clara, I kept asking people if they'd heard of a girl abandoned on a road. I never stopped searching. Tears streamed down my face. I thought I lost you forever." He shook his head firmly. "You were never lost. Just hidden until I could find you again." I had to ask, "What about him?" Samuel's eyes darkened. Daddy drank himself to death 2 years ago. Cirrhosis of the liver. He died alone in a public hospital. No funeral, no prayers. Just a man swallowed by his own anger. I thought I'd feel relief, maybe even triumph. But what washed over me was a heavy, aching pity. He had left me on a road, but in truth, he had been walking his own lonely road all along. I don't hate him anymore, I whispered. I just mourn what he could have been. Evelyn reached across the table, squeezing my hand and then Samuel's. Children, she said softly, some fathers give us life only to teach us what not to become. His road ended in sorrow. Yours will not. Samuel looked at Evelyn then, his eyes filling. And you must be the angel I've heard about. You saved my sister when no one else would. Evelyn smiled, wiping her eyes with her apron. I'm no angel. I'm just a woman who couldn't walk past a child in need. But if you'll let me, I'd be honored to love you too. Me? Samuel's voice cracked. Family, Evelyn said firmly, isn't about blood alone. Family is who shows up, who stays, who cares. My table has room for one more. Samuel lowered his head, overcome. When he lifted it again, his tears were shining. Then I'd be honored to call you Mama too. Samuel began visiting every week. He helped Evelyn fix the chicken coop, carried sacks of feed from town, and mended the fence when storms knocked it down. He was quiet at first, shadows of the street life still clinging to him, but little by little he laughed again, the same laugh I remembered from when we were children chasing fireflies. We spent hours catching up. I told him about the adoption, about how I became Clara Brooks. He told me about the years he wandered, the friends who came and went, the times he nearly gave up hope. Finding you, he said one night by the fire, was the only thing that kept me alive. I promised myself I wouldn't stop searching until I did. I leaned against his shoulder, the way I had when we were children. You kept your promise. And now we'll never lose each other again. A few months later, Evelyn made her decision. Over supper, she set down her fork and looked at Samuel with the same steady eyes she had once used on me. Son, she said. He blinked, startled. Did you just call me? Yes, she said firmly. Because that's what you are if you want it. I've got more love than one heart can hold, and I won't waste it. Move in here, Samuel. Be part of this family. Samuel's throat worked, but no words came. Finally, he whispered, I'd be honored. The three of us held hands across the table, tears and laughter mingling, as if the years of loss were finally being sewn together with a new thread of belonging. By the time I reached 19, the dusty road where my father abandoned me felt like a dream half remembered. Life with Evelyn and Samuel had filled the hollow places with laughter, routine, and purpose. But the truth is, scars don't vanish, they transform. Mine became a reminder. Family is not who leaves, but who stays. Evelyn worked harder than anyone her age should have, expanding our little garden and selling preserves at the market. With Samuel's help, our stall became known across town. Folks came from miles away for Brooks family peach butter. They didn't just taste sweetness. They tasted the love that bound us together. Evelyn kept pushing me to dream. Clara, she said one night, your mind was made for more than chores and cooking. You'll be a teacher. Knowledge is the one inheritance that never rusts. And she was right. With her support and Samuel's encouragement, I studied, graduated, and enrolled in college. Each step forward felt like proof that the road didn't define me, what came after did. Friends, if you believe education is the door that can change a child's life, please like this story, share it with someone who values family, and make sure you subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. At 23, I married Robert Miller, a kind man with patient eyes. Evelyn beamed at the wedding, tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispered, "My daughter, loved and chosen twice." Samuel stood beside me, proud as any brother. For the first time, I knew what it meant to have both a mother and a sibling rooting for me without condition. Robert and I built a life that echoed Evelyn's lessons. Our table was never too small for one more. Soon, our family grew. Our firstborn daughter we named Evelyn, after the woman who saved me. Then came Charles and Anna. Evelyn, the elder, spent countless afternoons at Mama Brooks's knee, learning to stir pots and snap beans. Charles followed Samuel to the market, learning the worth of honest work. Little Anna loved books, curling beside me as I prepared lessons for my students. Time, however, is both a healer and a thief. In her 80s, Evelyn grew frail. Her once steady hands trembled, her steps slowed, but her eyes never lost their light. Samuel moved back home full-time to help care for her. We all took turns. Robert, the children, even neighbors who owed her kindness returned it with meals and prayers. One evening, near the end, she called me to her bedside. Her voice was thin but steady. "Clara, my dear daughter," she whispered, "do you remember that day I found you under the oak tree?" Tears streamed down my cheeks. "I'll never forget." She squeezed my hand weakly. "I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You gave me a reason to rise each morning, a reason to keep breathing after loneliness tried to bury me. Promise me something, child, promise me you'll pass this love on. Teach your children, your grandchildren, that family is built with love, not blood." "I promise, Mama," I said through sobs. With that, she smiled the softest smile I'd ever seen and drifted into her final sleep. After Evelyn's passing, Samuel and I made sure her spirit lived on. We kept the farmhouse, tended the garden, and continued selling preserves under the name Brooks Family Homemade. Each jar felt like a story sealed tight, carrying her love to strangers' tables. Her lessons took root in my children. My daughter Evelyn became a social worker for abandoned children, saying, "Grandma Brooks taught me no child should feel invisible." Charles became a youth counselor, dedicating his life to guiding kids who felt lost. Anna, like me, became a teacher, reminding her students daily that they were worthy of love and belonging. Our home became known as a place where anyone in need could find food, a bed, or just a listening ear. Neighbors joked that we were the family with an expandable table. But to me, it was Evelyn's promise made flesh. Love grows when you share it. Now, at 77, I sit on my porch in Savannah watching my great-grandchildren play. Their laughter replaces the silence of that lonely road. Their joy is the sound of Evelyn's legacy echoing through generations. People sometimes ask if I still hate my father for what he did. The answer is no. In some twisted way, his abandonment led me to the greatest gift of my life, Evelyn. He left me broken on the road, but she made me whole. What I carry isn't bitterness. It's gratitude for the stranger who chose me, for the brother who found me, and for the chance to build a family bigger than any bloodline. My dear listeners, if you take nothing else from my story, take this. Life's greatest gift is not a life without pain, but the ability to find love in the very place pain tried to destroy you. When you see a child in need, open your arms. When you meet someone broken, share your kindness. When you're given love, multiply it. That is how we change the world, not with grand gestures, but one heart at a time. And if tonight you feel abandoned or unseen, let my story remind you, your Evelyn is out there. Hope often comes from where you least expect it. This is my truth, carried across decades. From a dusty road of despair to a porch full of laughter, my life proves that family is love, not blood. If this journey has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and make sure you subscribe. Together, we'll keep telling stories that prove love can change the world.